Hello everyone! Today, I will share with you some of the reading strategies and techniques that we may use to improve our reading skills as well as our reading comprehension. So the first two are, I think, two of the most common reading strategies that we encounter or unconsciously we do every time we read. So first is skimming. So we do skimming when we try to get the main theme or main idea of a certain material. This technique could also be used in surveying a material before settling down to read it in detail. Skimming can also come in handy when you need to review something that you have read before, like notes or articles or stories. And when skimming a previous read, you move your eyes quickly over the material to help refresh your memory. So, for example, going through a newspaper or magazine to know what is covered. So, when reading a newspaper, you don't have or you don't really read the information in the newspaper in detail. You just get the main idea of what is covered or what are covered in the newspaper or in the magazine. Another example is going through a product review to have an idea of the product's features. So when you are to purchase a certain product, uh, when you are reviewing the information of the product, you don't really read all the information that is in there. You just skim, you just do skimming to know what that product is about or what's that for or how do you use that. So that is how we do skimming. So the second one is scanning. So this is quite similar to skimming in approach since it is also done quickly. But the difference is while skimming is done to get the main idea of the whole material, scanning is done to find specific information in the material. So when we do skimming, we try to get the main idea. We read the text to get its main idea. So we are only after the main idea of that article, but when we do scanning, we look for specific information in that article. Hence, it requires us to pay attention to almost all of the details put in there, but it doesn't really necessary to understand all of them. You just have to look for that specific information that you are after too. So for example, looking up a name from a telephone guidebook. So when we look for a name, it's specific. Therefore, we need to read each name in order for us to find our target name. So that is how we do scanning. Another example is, I think, what we did last election, where we find our names on the list. We go through all the names listed in a specific paper, but we don't really read each information like their names, surnames, address, and their precinct number. We just have to look for the name to find our names. So the difference again is in skimming, it's more general. We just have to find the main idea, and in scanning, it's looking for a specific information. So the third reading technique that we have here is active reading. From its name, it's active. It's active because it encourages us to be engaged in what we are reading. It's not just about simply reading the text or the information that is put there. Rather, it requires us to have an active participation upon reading. So, therefore, there is an action, there is a movement needed for us to do this method. So in active reading, there are tips on how we can do this. First one is ask questions. So when we read and do this particular strategy, we ask ourselves about the things that we need to know why or we need to ask ourselves why we are reading that particular text. So you ask yourself, what does this mean? What is the significance of this statement? Any questions that would supply your curiosity or your interest as to why you are reading that particular text. So another is look for patterns. So in active reading, you are also looking for patterns that is used in that particular text. Another is highlight and make notes. So when we do active reading, it would require us to have um, pens, papers, or highlighters, because since it's active, it would require us to move not just our minds, our eyes and lips, but also our hands. Another is to link to existing knowledge. This one, we try to understand how or what you are reading relates to what you know about the topic. In this way, you will clearly see how the information is added to your knowledge. Another is write a summary. So after you read, you will write what you have understood upon reading that particular text, or you will summarize all the information and knowledge that you have gathered all throughout your reading. And another tip is to test yourself. Using what you have read, ask yourself mock questions and try to answer these. Testing yourself will tell you how well you understand the material and how well do you remember about the material. And lastly is to teach. Try to explain what you have read to someone else. It's like sharing what you have read and understood upon that text. So in that way, you are actively reading and learning and sharing what you have understood from yourself to another person. And our fourth reading strategy, is detailed reading. From the word detailed, this reading technique is used to extract accurate information from a reading material. So detailed reading usually starts with skimming. You skim the material and to have an idea of what it is about, then you carefully read through. So you have to determine the main idea of the text before you settle down and read it thoroughly. So I think in doing detailed reading, since it's detailed, you need to pay attention to every word that is written in that text. And if there's any unfamiliar words that you would encounter, you have to look for the meaning of that word in a dictionary. So I think detailed reading would also require you to have a dictionary beside you. So an example of detailed reading is doing a movie script review or critiquing a book. So when we critique a book, we read the book detailed in a detailed way. So we pay attention to the words that is used in explaining the theme of that book, and whenever we encounter unfamiliar words, phrases, or ideas, we try to search and look for it online to understand and to have a better understanding of what that book is about. So that is how we do detailed reading. And I think the benefits of it for a student is that it doesn't just strengthen or develop or help them develop their reading skills as well as their reading comprehension, but also it adds up to their vocabulary. It strengthens the level of their vocabulary. The fifth one is speed reading. Although it sounds very easy since you will just read a text quickly, this method is, I think, one of the most difficult since in speed reading you have to read a text quickly, but you also have to comprehend the text quickly. So that is how it is done. So I think speed reading requires practice, and it requires skills because it is not just an easy task na when you decide to do speed reading, you will be successful in doing so. So before doing speed reading, you have to equip yourself with the proper skills and you have to practice because in speed reading, again, you're not simply running your eyes through texts, rather, you are reading every word but fast. Importantly, you are comprehending the text as you speed through. And one example of this is doing a last minute review for an examination. So let's say for an instance, you are now done reviewing your notes in a particular subject and you have forgotten something about it and you decided to do a last minute review. So in doing a last minute review, you do speed reading. So you read the text quickly to remember and to understand the informations written in that specific note. Since it is difficult to master, here are some guides or guidelines or tips that you may use if you want to try speed reading. So first is to guide your eyes. So run a finger or a pen under the words you are reading. So it's like using a pen and guiding your eyes as you do speed reading. So I think you are familiar with it since even I myself also do this whenever I read a text, especially if the text is very small. Another is deadline strategy. So you measure how much time it takes you to read a page. So it basically involves time management in reading a specific material. So it helps you organize the time you spend in reading a specific text. So in doing so, you you can monitor your progress or your rate, your speed in reading a specific text. So lastly is to adjust reading speed. When speed reading, slow down on the first sentence in a paragraph and increase your speed as you go. So it is not done um, in uh, a single rate. I think it also has dynamics or variety. So in the first level, you have to slow down. You have to read, I think, slowly. And when you adapt to its system, you can now read quickly and adjust the level and do speed reading. The sixth one is the structure proposition evaluation, or the SPE technique. So this technique has three steps. First one is find the structure of the text. In this step, you simply study the layout of the text. You can do this by looking at the table of contents or the headings and subheadings in the text. So it is about the structure or the layout of the text that you are reading. So the second step is find the author-made propositions. In each section of the text, you find the logical relationships between the author's proposition. So it is basically determining how the statements relate to one another. So it's like finding or looking for the relationship or connection of the statements of the authors presented in that text. And the third step is evaluate the final arguments and conclusions. So look at the text's conclusion and determine whether the statements of the texts actually lead to that conclusion. So it's also like seeking or looking for connection, whether the information in that text are fit or are combined, or if they relate to one another. The seventh technique is the SQ3R technique. So it is named after its 5 steps, which are survey, question, read, recite, and review. And this technique is great for comprehension and memory. So the first step is survey. So it is preparing your mind to receive the material, and surveying involves getting a quick idea of the whole material. So basically, it's like researching or surveying about the material. So there are different ways to survey a reading material, and those are first, reading the introduction. Second is looking at the chapters or headings and subheadings, looking at the pictures or charts if there are any, and reading the summary. And lastly is to look up for study questions, look for questions. So that is how we do surveying. Second step under this technique is to question. This step is about preparing questions that you will find answers to in the materials as you read. And you can easily create questions from headings and subheadings. So for example, if a heading in a chapter is drinking alcohol before a workout, you can ask yourself a question like, does drinking alcohol before a workout have adverse effect? So that questions, as you go along and you read through that text, you will find answers to that. So third one is read. So reading, this is the third step under this method. So reading as the third step of the SQ3R model is more productive than reading the material straight up. So this is because you already have an idea of the material and questions in mind that you seek answers to. So on the second step, you formulate questions and you'll find answers to that in the third step, which is reading. So for the fourth step under this method is recite. This is where you answer the questions that you'd created before starting to read. So in this step, this is where you will answer the questions that you formulated earlier. So the fifth step is review. This is simply making mental notes of what you had read to see how much of it you remember. So it's like reviewing what you have understood, reviewing the questions that you have answered, and reviewing all the learning and information that you have gathered as you go along and read through the material. So that is the steps in doing the SQ3R technique. So those are some of the reading techniques and strategies that we may use. I hope you have learned something from us, and thank you for listening.